Hello and welcome to this special edition of the DX Mentor, Episode 10, the International DX Convention, or Visalia. Thank you for joining us. I'm Bill, AJ8B, the DX Mentor. My guests are DX gurus that we can all learn from. In this episode, we'll get an update on the Visalia DX Convention from Scott, K0MD, and Ned, AA7A. I'm sure you'll remember both of these gentlemen as they were on the very first DX Mentor podcast. I was grateful for them participating in them and really grateful tonight as this is just going to be a great show. I always ask for an update on achievements from our listeners, and I was not disappointed this week. I received the following from Ernie, W8 Echo Hotel. The results are out for the December 2022 ARRL 160 meter CW contest. I won first place in Ohio in the single op unlimited high power class. I also placed third in the Great Lakes division and 45th in the US/VE division. I made 761 contacts over 2 nights for 101,728 points. Not my best score, but conditions that weekend were not great on 160. My 160 meter station is an ICOM IC7610, a Drake L7 amp, and an inverted L supported by my 30-foot tower. Congratulations to Ernie for a job well done. We're proud of you. I also wanted to say a special hello to my friend, Bob McCullough. Bob is not yet a ham, but listens to every episode and had some great questions during my recent sailing excursion with Bob and Glida. Hello to Bob and keep those questions coming. Let me know when you're ready to take the test. Now let's tune into our gurus and find out what they're discussing about Visalia. Well, hello and welcome to this special edition of the DX Mentor podcast. I'm Bill, AJ8B, and I am absolutely thrilled that I'm able to bring this to you. We have two distinguished hams who are with us tonight to talk about the 74th International DX Convention held in Visalia, or I think for me more comfortably simply known as Visalia. And I'd like to let them introduce themselves and what their role was. And then Scott, K0MD, is going to be driving us. And we're going to have a free-for-all and talk about this convention that those of us in the Midwest and the East need to make more of an effort to attend. So Scott, take it away.
Thank you, Bill. Hello, everybody. I'm Scott, K0MD. I was a speaker at Visalia, an attendee, as well as one of the medical advisors on their COVID mitigation efforts for the meeting. This is the first year in 4 years that Ned and his team put Visalia on. And it's really, I think, the preeminent DX and contest meeting in the United States every year. So I was grateful they went to the work to do it and delighted to have attended it. And I think after you hear us talk about it, you'll definitely want to be there the next time it's put on.
Okay. And we also have Ned, AA7A. Ned?
Yeah, well, good. Hello, Ned Stearns, AA7A. I was one of the co-chairs of the convention this year. I was just going through the email collection I had amassed over the past 15 months, and it amazed me that we actually started this journey 15 months ago. And when we did start, it was about the time when the efforts to hold the meeting in 2022 sort of got off the rails, given the effects of COVID. So Scott was very instrumental in giving us guidance and pointing the way to get the information we needed to properly plan this convention. And his prediction was that the effects of COVID would abate and be especially minimum in the springtime, which turned out to be absolutely true. So as a labor of love, first time for me to be a co-chair. I've been involved with the convention for many years, probably been involved in some aspect of the convention for probably 15 years, but my club, Central Arizona DX, joined forces with Northern Cal DX Club and put together the staff that ran the affair this year. And from all accounts, everybody walked away very, very happy. I mean, it was a lot of smiling faces. Everybody was just so glad to be, out of their basement and meeting with old friends. So we got the band back together, and it was just a lot of fun.
Well, there's one aspect I'd like you to touch on later, and Scott may have a slide, but what absolutely blew me away going through the website was the prizes. My goodness, you had, top line radios from various manufacturers, and not just one or two of them, but a bunch of them. So I think that speaks to your credibility and that of the committee and the convention, and of course the attendees, how well attended it was. But wow, that very impressive lineup. So my hat's off to you. So Scott, if you want to get started with your slides, and we'll do our best to describe this both for our podcast as well as then the follow-up on YouTube, and I'm sure we'll be able to handle it. So go ahead.
Thanks, Bill. Well, the International DX and Contest Convention has been held in Visalia, California for a large number of years. Ned, maybe you know the history a lot better than I do, but this is how many years going?
This is the well, you're gonna cause me to panic on that. I think it's the 77th year of holding this event. It started out as just a small number of DXers that met. I think it might have started in the LA area, but quickly became an event that involved hams across the state of California, and they met in either Fresno or Visalia every year until 2019 for quite a few years. And there was the gap here, obviously, because of COVID, and we're back on track again for hopefully running this event every year going forward.
Yes. I attended in 2018 and 2019, and maybe even 2017. And it's really an amazing conference. If you like DXing, if you like contesting, if you like HF, 6-meter DXing, the who's who globally come. It's an international meeting. Chris, who's chair of the Chiltern DX Club, came with his wife. A number of UK hams, a number of Finnish hams and Swedish hams, and there were some VKs and ZLs there. This year I didn't see a lot of Japanese amateurs, but in the past I have. And it's really just a neat grouping of people. You meet the people that you've worked who've been the major leaders of DX expeditions. Every morning we were treated to this beautiful California sunrise. And this is right over the conference center where it was held. If you look carefully at this, you can see there was a US tower cranked up with a hex beam. So they had a special event station going, but almost all the attendees really ignored that because they were there to talk with friends and fellow DXers and hear about DX expeditions, and especially about the Bouvet DX expedition. And just really talk about where we've all been in the last 4 years. People were just so happy to be there. It's largely a California gathering. A few of us will fly in, but here, we saw a lot of cars in the parking lot. This is K0MD and KF6JAD brought his truck, and there were just a number of hams who were there, who came. You can see in this photo, my friend K4IU from my home community of Rochester, Minnesota, came with me. And his photo is with Tom Schiller, who founded N6BT and now has next generation antennas, and Tom's significant other, Vicky Zumwalt, N6 KLS. They had a booth in the exhibition hall. And then, of course, some of the convention planning committee. Everyone knows Lee Finkel, KY7M, very accomplished DXer, part of the Voodoo DX group with Ned. Lee's also editor of the National Contest Journal, accomplished individual. And then also Daryl, K7UT from Utah. I had never met Daryl. We have worked many times in sweepstakes and in the NAQP. And I told him it was so nice to meet the wonderful and buoyant voice behind all of those 5'9" Utah when I would work him, and I always looked forward to working him in any domestic event and contest. On Thursday evening after we arrived, we'd organized a dinner, and Ned came. Ned's been a top 10 D expeditioner many times. Dave Anderson, K4SV, attended, who's been a top 10 D expeditioner. Glenn Johnson came to dinner. Adrian and Mike, who were on the Bouvet team, joined us for dinner. Tom Schiller and Vicky joined us for dinner. Dan White, W5DNT, also came, and He's a major funder for DXpeditions out of Texas. And then Greg K1IT also joined us from Greer, South Carolina. He and Dave had driven all the way from basically the Greenville, South Carolina area in Dave's Tesla. And Dave regaled us all at that end of the table with driving the entire car on autopilot, just touching the steering wheel, paying attention, but it drove him and Greg all the way out to Visalia. And then Adrian asked for a few minutes at the end of dinner and wanted to present a special thank you award to Glenn Johnson, W0GJ. And you might be saying, well, why did the Bouvet team want to present Glenn a special award? And the answer was that anyone who worked Bouvet on FT8 recognized that there was a time sync problem in the first 100 or 200 QSOs with FT8. And people were speculating, at least in our contest in DX Reflectors, about whether that was a real station from Bouvet or a pirate. But what it turns out that Glenn had loaned his satellite phone to Adrian, and that became the time sync source for all of the FT8 contacts. So one generous ham from Decorah, Iowa, loaned his satellite phone to Adrian, and that allowed the entire world to then better, more efficiently work Bouvet on FT8. And so they presented Glenn a certificate. And then you can see, if you look at the YouTube presentation, you'll see a tiny little piece of rock. That's a piece of rock from Bouvet that they brought back as a gift for Glenn. And it was quite the story to hear them talk about coming through customs with the rocks and explaining to the customs officials why they had them. And here is another picture of a Bouvet rock they showed. We all got to hold this piece of rock. It looks like any volcanic ash, but I wasn't sure what to expect from Bouvet. Ned, I don't know what you thought, but it sure looked like volcanic rock to me. It looked like something pretty hard to have to pound either a guy anchor into or a ground rod.
Well, my fear of taking anything off these Antarctic islands, that it might be some byproduct of a penguin. So I generally try not to handle anything that comes from one of these expeditions.
Well said. And then we also had met Mike, who was one of the team physicians on Bouvet, and Dave, WD5COV, who also was a member of the DXpedition, and they shared with us, some of the strategies they used. And Mike and the other physician on the team from the Seven Land here in Arizona was very good about, they both were quite good about stressing prevention. Don't sprain your ankle, don't fracture a limb, because we don't have an emergency room within 1,000 miles to take you to. So the first day of the Visalia meeting is the DX and Contest Universities. So if you want to learn how to be a better DXer or contester, and here's Dave, WD5COV lecturing, there were probably 50 to 100 hams in each of those forums. And then they also had a second stream going across the hall. There were two rooms on one side of the hall, DX and Contest University. And then on the other side were just a big room with a couple hundred people talking about DX and contest activities. And here's an example of the DX forum that was there. You can see the room was really full. It was standing room only. In one photo, you can see my travel mate, K4IU Fred, and my good friend, Dan, W5D&T, who were there. Lots of questions that we'll touch on in just a few minutes here. This was the contest forum, which was also there. Bob Wilson in 6TV does a nice job of making it like the McNeil-Air report, where he poses questions and tries to generate controversy. So he always invites Whiskey 2 Golf Delta John Cravoli, who's not shy about sharing opinions or saying controversial things. And then Kim Duffy, K3LR, who's got a huge contest station in Western Pennsylvania. Craig Thompson, K9CT, a big multi-2 contest station in Trevoli, Illinois, and chair of the Contest Advisory Committee. And then one of the ARRL Southwest Division Director, Dick Norton, was there also. Dick comes every year in a suit and tie, and he was also provocative. There was some discussion about self-spotting and sideband contesting, and one of the panelists was against it. The other two thought it was an appropriate thing. And then Dick Norton said he would throw spotting out altogether if he could, because he thinks that's just not the way it was all designed to be from the beginning. So there was quite a difference in philosophy and opinion there. Here's the banquet. This is on Saturday night, and there was at least 500 people having a great meal. You could have a choice of a very nice steak, nice salmon, which I had, or chicken. And then the banquet speaker was the team from Bouvet, Adrian, K08SCA, Dave, WD5COV, and Mike. I think he's 85 Echo Bravo spoke, and I think they went almost 2 hours with their presentation.
Wow.
So a lot of detail about that, and maybe Ned would like to just comment on some of the interesting things he learned from their banquet talk about Bouvet, maybe even a bit more than was on this Mentor podcast a few weeks ago.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the Saturday banquet is always the big attraction. Every year we try to bring the most interesting story to the convention, and sometimes it works well, and sometimes it blows up in your face, and just kind of the way it works. We have memories of good memories of many of the talks, and then we don't talk about the other ones. But this talk on Saturday night was a little long, but I think it was warranted because the story is incredibly complex. The challenges that team had to face were unique. I mean, the history of Antarctic de-expedition has recently been dominated by activities that were run off the Braveheart vessel and their team, of sailors who are, as I put it, also members of a New Zealand rugby team that helps hams get on the island and live on the island during their operation. But that is behind us. That that team is no longer in play, and the 2023 Bouvet operation tried something different. They took a two-hull sailboat with a smaller crew and a crew that really didn't provide any support to much outside of working the Zodiac towards the shore. Didn't help them with provisioning and the like on the shore. So the members of the team had to physically get through the surf, and climb the mountain or the hills and drag all the gear themselves. So it was a real challenge physically, emotionally. And there were some events that occurred that were just really challenging, almost life-threatening to a small degree. So the story needed to be told, and the three speakers would rotate through and giving their world, their view, which was fascinating and worth sharing with the DX community. So it was a great talk. The results. People beg for more, and I'm sure there's going to be another visit to the island in the future.
I remember early on, one of the big objections that the community seemed to have surrounded the type of boat they had selected, and yet I have not heard anything that indicated that was a bad choice. There was a lot of other issues, perhaps, that I've talked to Adrian about, but that boat was flawless and just performed like they thought it would. Yeah.
One of the members of the Northern Cal DX Foundation, of which I'm a member, director, he designs and builds boats, and he gave his opinion recently that he felt that really this type of boat, it's aluminum hull, lightweight, it's sleek, and it rides with the waves much better than a heavy steel hulled boat, and so the punishment to the people on board is much less. But it took them 2.5 days to load that boat because everything had to be strapped down really, really tight. Otherwise, you'd have projectiles all through the hull. So it took a little bit longer to prepare, and I think their average like 8 knots or something like that. So it was it took an extra day or two to get there, but it served them well to get there.
Wow.
Yeah, they told us of stories of waves 40 to 80 feet high coming up in the South Atlantic, which would be scary to me, but I know Ned has sailed in those waters, and the boat would list up to 40 degrees on its side, but it would always recover. And that really inspired them. And they took turns standing watch. The captain could only stand for so many hours a day and drive the boat. And so the crew was all trained to help drive it as well. And, they had a cook on board, and they had one crewmate. So a total of 3, I think, crew members, and then the team. So they really did pitch in and help with this. And they had a consultant that I learned about who was an Antarctic vacation or extreme vacation consultant. who actually, I think, was a lot of the reason for the success of the safety of the journey, of how he just demanded and insisted that everything be racked down. It took them several hours of re-attempting to just strap down empty jugs with water, for example. And then he is the one who designed the closed ring system that allowed them to get on the island and to pull things on. And to hear them tell the stories about the summation of two 8-foot waves becoming a 12-foot wave and crashing on shore and pulling you and your boat and your tent and your bag out, and other members running to grab you to keep you from going out to sea.
Wow.
And it was, despite all the maybe frustrations of the DX community at not getting a dozen band modes from this team, they really risked their lives and souls doing this. And this was all, they did it for the fun of the hobby and just as a commitment to DXing. And so I'm especially grateful for them because it was an all-time new one for me, and I have one contact, but that's enough. And I have credit in LOTW. So, I do hope somebody will go back. I would love to work them on 80 and 160 if it ever becomes possible, but these are extreme conditions. And I think they have to plan to be on this island, to get on the island and to survive on the island like NASA did to put astronauts on the moon. I don't know that it's any easier to go to Bouvet. Ned, was that your impression maybe?
Yeah. I'd heard that there are more people have been on the moon than have been on the islands of Bouvet. So it is treacherous to land, and survival requires you to have a good plan and backups. And they were tested. I mean, their first attempt to land, they did get a number of their team on the island to do some early reconnaissance, and they had to regroup after that first launch and come up with a whole different way of getting their equipment on. They had a very large generator, which there's no way they can get on shore, and they also came up with something unique. They essentially created flotation bubbles for chunks of their gear so that it would stay afloat, and they would, as Scott had mentioned, they had a clothesline pulley system which was anchored out up beyond the brake line of the surf, and then the members on shore would pull in the gear with this method that took a lot of physical strength, and something you don't realize. And it didn't hit me until I started seeing the pictures of the island. That you're used to seeing surf like in Oahu or something like that, and it rolls in, and you can walk out to 200-300 feet and you're waist deep in water, but at this shore it was like a 45-degree angle. So when the surf hit you, it pulled you straight underwater and down that hill.
Wow.
The minute you get through the surf, you're climbing uphill. So it's a very, very difficult landing. And I guess unless you're there, and we were virtually there, seeing all the video clips and listening to them talk, and it just is different than anything you're used to. And there's no preparing for it. You can train all you want where you want, but when you get here, it exceeds anything you had tried to do before.
And the water, of course, is Antarctic temperature. It's 35, 40, 45 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's not like a warm bath. It's frigidly cold water that you can die in a few minutes from shock and other things. I think something Ned said is maybe worth just highlighting again, because for those of us who have worked a lot of top 10 DXpedition groups who've been on the Braveheart, we've maybe failed to recognize that something in the Ned is so nicely pointed out, which is that prior to the Bouvet DXpedition, there were a group of people in superb shape who could lift 50 to 200 pounds and carry it in and put it up and save the ham operators, who largely are weekend warriors, right? Most ham operators are not in the shape to play a professional sport like rugby or US football or soccer. And so you have a lot of middle-aged and older men, and a few women occasionally going to DXpeditions who are not the best of shape. And they had the crews that would carry these 250-pound generators onto the island and help them get it set up and then take it down at the end. But the team at Bouvet didn't have any of that. So it was a do-it-yourself, a DIY project the whole way. And, it was really hard. And I think, going forward, the expedition teams may have to think about having sort of a balance of experienced senior operators and healthy younger adults who can do this and have some physical training requirements or some strenuous testing requirements to go. And just to add, salt in the wound, when this team got back to South Africa, after not having had a warm shower for a month, and not having had many warm meals, certainly not having beef more than once in 40 days, they got into the harbor, and Cape Town is just beautiful in the harbor from all the pictures I've seen. And they couldn't get on the island get on the African continent for a day because the slip was full and their boat had to sit out there. And so their dreams of getting into a hotel and having a warm shower and a comfortable bed was delayed another 24 hours. And that would have broken a lot of people, but they kept their stiff upper lip going and just managed and went right on.
Wow. I can remember Adrian in the conversation we had talking about they regrouped and they kind of took a vote. So who wanted to go on the island via the water, right? The water method, and who would stay behind. I got to tell you, I was thinking, boy, if I was there, I don't know that I would have been up for jumping in the cold water and trying to shuttle myself to the island. That would have been a whole different decision that I would think maybe I was in shape to do X, but now I've got to do X in a very dangerous environment. And I don't know that I would have been up for that. I probably would have stayed behind.
Well, I was given a shot I was the first to walk ashore on South Sandwich in the VP8 SSI, the expedition 2016. And I'm just adventurous, and when we got close to shore and the captain said, okay, jump in the water and walk ashore, I didn't think twice, because I figured he knew what he was talking about. But when I jumped in the water, I landed on rocks, and I was surrounded by seals, and there was large chunks of ice flying all around me, and it was interesting. But I got aboard, and that was the only way we could have gotten on the island. So when you're faced with doing something challenging, usually your gut, it guides you into making the right decision. I know that that while we were landing on the island, the people on the boat were on binoculars and they're watching us, and Paul in 6PSC was sort of giving blow-by-blow details of the landing to the worldwide net, and he mentioned, oh my, someone fell in the water. And of course, I didn't fall in the water, I jumped. It's a big difference, and my wife told me she was listening to these or watching these posts, and when she saw that someone had fallen in the water, she knew that was me. But it's a tough decision when you're there. Your gut will tell you what you're going to do, and I know that not everybody on the team went ashore. Not everybody was capable of doing that, and that has to be worked. There has to be some additional another idea that has to be created and brought to bear on the next landing there. So we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
I do think some of the team members who did not operate were able to go the last day and help take some of the things off the island. So a number of them did get to set foot on the island, even for just a few hours. But one of the challenges that most of us may not realize is that the initial landing crew got stranded there for several days because of weather. They couldn't get the raft back to them. One of the rafts got punctured and was lost to sea. So they lost one of their life rafts. And so the first night they didn't have a tent up, and they hid in a crevice, and they stayed very close to one another to stay warm. And it was so cold that they couldn't go to sleep because their fingers and toes hurt. So they just walked around and tried to stay alert and wait until the sun came up to warm them up. They also, had very few days. I think they were there 3 or 4 days waiting on, they had food, but it wasn't, meals like we think. And they had to eat sort of military rations the whole time. when they did get everything set up, they were in a small tent sitting on the ground, right? With radios on like a milk crate turned upside down, or a bucket, actually, and one on top, one K3 on top of another. It was like an extreme field day adventure. And yeah, and then not having the computer time sync, because they couldn't even get a computer that would work with FT8. They had to engineer that. Yeah, once you hear the story from them firsthand, you become much less critical of maybe what they did not do, and much more grateful for what they actually did do, pulling it off, and realizing that they put all this stuff at risk, and they each paid 25 or 30,000 or more to go just so we could work them. Wow, that's a real gift to the DX community that we should really be grateful for and honor them with appreciation. So. Well, let me just move on. There was a number of issues that came up in the DX forum that Ned is particularly well suited to maybe comment on as well. I think the listeners might find it interesting. So one of the top issues that came up was the cost of DXpeditions. Now, of course, Bouvet was $750,000 or close, but the upcoming Pitcairn trip is going to be well over 300,000. And again, it goes back to one key factor. That's the loss of the Braveheart. And so the crew, Gene Spinelli and his team, going to Pitcairn. I'm not Pitcairn. It's a TX5. Help me think of the name here. Clipperton. Not Pitcairn. It's Clipperton. The loss of the Braveheart has resulted in them needing to lease or use a U.S.-based carrier, which means that they're paying for U.S. prices and U.S. wages, and that's good for the people on the ship, but it's a higher cost to the DX community. And there's also, a realization that post-COVID, everything costs more, and clubs maybe are still using the donation limits they used before COVID, and maybe those limits should just be doubled, or suggested amounts, and individuals should just double their donations, because the costs seem to have doubled for even simple DXpeditions like Clipperton. And again, I apologize for calling it Pitcairn, but it's Clipperton. And it turns out I guess this is something that's common knowledge. Ned maybe wants to comment, but they need a lot of the money up front. They have to make the boat payment for Clipperton by December. And can they get the almost $300,000 they need to get that boat secured, or the whole thing goes down the tubes?
Yeah, as Scott says, the upfront funding is critical for even starting a project. You need to put down deposits. You need to buy the fuel before you even leave harbor, and many people wait till they pay for their confirmation using the online QSL system of QRS or other methods to pay after the fact, and unfortunately that's way late. And the other thing is, you're going to pay for that boat and for the fuel. Even if you land and make one contact and the weather moves in, you go home, all those costs are there. So the grants by foundations, the Northern Cal DX Foundation being, the largest in the world, usually is the key to success in pulling off an event like these island DXpeditions. And we try to do everything we can to make sure that our investments are result in success. So we vet all requests for grants, and we also provide advice. Many times we provide operators to these expeditions to help guarantee their success. Another thing we're working on, and I don't want to jump your track here a little bit, but we are also working on ways of reducing costs of DXpeditions by this new technology we call radio in a box, which I think we've touched on in previous DX Mentor episodes, and it is another component of going forward, where we can provide very high QSO rates with less operators on the island, which is going to reduce costs, permit maybe smaller vessels to be used for some of these adventures. Bouvet's going to set some high watermarks for cost per QSO I think it's something on the order of $25 per contact, or $90 per person contacted. So if you're sitting there hovering over your, your button to how much you want to pay with the expedition, and you think $5 means something, some of these expeditions, you might want to reconsider what it really costs. And if this is what you want to, you want to achieve something in this hobby, and it requires these sort of efforts, you may think about where that fits into your ham radio budget. I personally, I donate to pretty much all large expeditions, and I'm very happy to make one or none. QSOs, it doesn't matter to me. I want this hobby to perpetuate. I want these teams to succeed, so that the next island they go to, where I do need them, they'll be, well equipped and seasoned operators, and I can, have a better chance of working them on that operation. So
I think that's so important, because I think the three of us will readily say, and many people, when interviewed by great ham radio interviewers like Eric Guth, 4Z1UG, talk about how ham radio impacted their careers, and the success of my career in the healthcare field and the confidence to study medicine as a young student at the university was certainly helped by being an amateur radio operator, and the technical skills that I gained, even though I'm not the best kit builder, really helped prepare me. And I think Ned would probably say the same as an engineer, and you as a software expert, Bill, that ham radio really prepared us for what we did in life. And I think it's really important to try to help make sure the next generation has this opportunity, and DXing is one of the great ways to do that. We could have debates all day long about how contesting may look in 10 or 20 years, but DXing, is still what really excites a lot of people. And when people say to me, they'll say, "Oh, you're a ham radio operator. Where's the farthest place you talked to?" And I always say, "Name any country in the world, and I'll tell you if I've worked them." And almost all the time, they pick someplace they think is really far away, like Australia, and I'll say every day I can work them. Yeah, worked them many times. So I think, as Ned says, we all need to make a second effort to give a fair amount of money to all the DXpeditions, even if we don't need them, because it's still a lot of fun. And as Gene Spinelli said in one of the forums, most of the people working the DXpeditions don't need them for credit. They just enjoy the thrill of hearing a rare one on and getting back into the fray. It's still
really true. Yeah.
Why we all did this. Well, there's another thing that came up too. And Ned, I want to thank you and all the members of the Northern California DX Foundation for all you do to underwrite these DXpeditions. I mean, NCDXF, among all foundations, provides a lot of money. What we learned from the Bouvet team was that raffle prizes help them raise $30,000 or $40,000. And, I think that's something that DXpeditions can learn. And so those of us who bought some of the raffle prizes, I didn't, but I certainly will going forward, knowing how important it is for funding. And then a lot of hams, are upset that the DXpeditions are asking them to pay $5 for a logbook upload or $10 with OQRS. And as Gene Spinelli said on one of his DXpeditions, he said, "We took no foundation money. The team members paid ourselves. We worked you, but that doesn't mean you get a free QSL from us. We spent our own money. You should help us by paying for a QSL." And I think, hams are notoriously frugal, right? We want everything at 50% off last discounted price, and that's just not happening with DXpeditions. And I often pay extra or donate extra just so I can have an early logbook confirmation, because I like to see it confirmed. And I think this really helps the DX community. And then, of course, I think the foundations really need to harmonize. I would like to see the European foundations do what NCDXF does. NCDXF says, okay, you can charge for a logbook upload until a year later, and then you need to put it up on logbook free. That's the contribution you're going to do for the community, for us giving you money. But some of the foundations required at 3 months. And I think a lot of DXpedition groups are going to have to decide, should I take the $5,000 from Foundation X if they're going to make me give away a lot of revenue just because they want me to put everything up for free at 3 months? And I know if I were a team member, I would say no. We can, the cash flow is better if we just wait and get the money coming in. So I think that's something to really consider. And in the foundations, if any of the members from the European foundations and others are listening, I think they should copy what the NCDXF does. And Ned, I'm sure you've had many discussions at the board about this and what more can be done. Maybe you could share how we can donate to NCDXF to help ensure the future of DXing.
Yeah, well, certainly the best way to get information on our mission is to go to our website, ncdxf.org. All the information is there. I'll probably rattle off a few errors if I try to paraphrase it, but we have been in existence for, I'm going to say, I don't recall, 45 years now. And it was all started with a grant from a single individual. And we have nurtured those funds, and we've grown to the point where we have awarded grants over $2 million so far to I'm going to say 150 or 200 DXpeditions, something in that neighborhood. I may be off on that, but that's my memory. And they're primarily to the top 25 or so, because that's where those are the ones that are challenging. They aren't on the air for good reasons. Either they require extraordinary transportation methods, or they require lengthy negotiations with various government agencies around the world. So we help with those, and we provide, actually, in some cases, many government agencies will need to know whether you are funded. And so having these grants issued from our organization many times helps them complete negotiations with getting landing permits. So it's each trip is different. And if you and many clubs, I know my own Central Arizona DX, we used to send grant small $100 whatever grants to DXpeditions, and word would get out, and then we get emails from everybody to get grants, and it's just not what we want to do, is to process and vet whether that's a viable investment or not. So we turned around and we just said, no, we're just going to do an annual grant to Northern Cal. And so over the years, I believe we've submitted about $15,000 in total grants to the foundation for them to use to administer to vet worthy, well-managed DXpedition projects. So that's an approach that we suggested to be considered by other clubs.
The two notes I've already made is that there's clearly a paradigm shift, right? So me sending $5 thinking I'm helping a DXpedition, I think the gesture is appreciated, but the impact is minimized. So I think we really do have to rethink that. But I'll tell you the other benefit of the foundation, and it really hit this year in the Southwest Club. We feel like we have a real responsibility to know who's out there, who might get the DXpedition of the year and at the DX dinner and those kinds of things. So I know every club looks at it, and I'm sure they do, but we seem to have a little bit of a. I don't think a meeting goes by where we don't debate who's out there and however we think they're going to do, et cetera. So our concern when Bouvet was announced, I guess 3 years ago now, was, well, the other group almost made it, but they didn't make it, and these guys are using a sailboat. We're gonna have to wait and see how this comes out. And when NCDX came out and Indexa came out and said, here's our largest grants ever, all of a sudden it was like, this is going to happen, because these guys must have vetted the heck out of this. They must have really looked deep. They looked at the people, they looked at the of the credibility of everyone involved, and they're willing to commit that kind of money publicly. This is going to happen. So the fact that those foundations, jumped in and were backing it quickly really helped set the tone, as far as I was concerned, in the rest of the community. All of a sudden it wasn't are they going to do it? It's they are going to do it, and now let's get behind them and get going. So the credibility that the foundations have is terrific, and when they do back something like that, it does have an effect everywhere. So that was just a great move.
Yeah, we've heard that.
Yeah, I agree. I use that as a guide to when I donate, and I try to give 2 or 3 times over a 6 to 12 month period. That way it's easier to just cash flow, and it doesn't strain the family budget so much. If I want to give $250, I can do it over 3 or 4 donations, and it's just money I just don't spend eating out or having coffee that month, and that's fine. It goes for a much better cause.
Can you go back real quick, Scott?
Sure.
Was there any more discussion about raffle prizes? And the reason I asked that is we are giving away a week at Turks and Caicos at VP5M. And we originally started to go through PayPal, and we found out that PayPal will not allow you to pay for chances and raffle prizes and things like that. So we had to do a lot of research to find the correct way to do it and the legal way to do it, and it's very difficult. And I know it varies from state to state as well. So I'm curious if was this just brought up, or did anybody get further into the details of how we might start doing this?
That's a great question, Bill. I don't recall there being any discussion about the details. And many years ago, I helped organize the W0 DXCC for 2 years running. And we ran into some club members who said, wait a minute, you got to follow the Minnesota law for raffle prizes, which we did. Then all the money went to Northern California DX Foundation. But I think it would maybe help if the ARRL or someone just did a little research for that and helped. These are going to happen in 10 to 20 U.S. states, not many more than that, right? And so I think it would be helpful for there to be some guidance out there. Maybe one of our attorney hams who is a DXer would be willing to look into this and to just provide some basic advice like Fred Hoppengarten has for antennas, because it's a great point. And, you know, now, of course, with PayPal starting this year, this calendar year, anything you sell, you have to prove to the IRS that you what your basis price was for it, because PayPal is going to be reporting it to the IRS. You know, it's a big thing in the used ham market. You know, if you sell a radio for $3,000 or $4,000, you want to make sure you have documentation of what you paid for it, so you're not taxed on the entire sale price as profit, as a capital gains profit. So I think we're going to see more and more need for what you just said, Bill. Is it okay if I move ahead to the next?
Yeah, please do. That was, yep.
Yeah, this brought a lot of discussion and probably went on 15, 20 minutes. And, you know, there were a number of questions raised. One younger ham who's only been licensed since about 2005 stood up for the DX forum, and he said, I'm only got 190 countries or something, and he said that when I look at the honor roll, I don't think I can make it. I don't think I'll ever make it in my lifetime. There's not enough time left, because there are some countries and places like Johnston Atoll and North Korea that I just don't have any hope of ever working, you know. And should we have a new award for other younger hams, you know, or what can we do to encourage newer DXers like me to stay active and not feel like it's a 50-year life cycle to get to the honor roll? And one of the hams in the auditorium, Dave Anderson, K4SV, who's been on a number of top 10 DX expeditions and is honor roll member and top of the honor roll ham, said, what about changing the mileage distance requirements for an island so that instead of being 300 and some odd miles, maybe it's 125 miles offshore, so that we could basically create 10 or 20 new DXCC entities. We'd all have them to work, and it would not take away from what others have worked, but it would make getting to the honor roll maybe a little easier, because then you could have greater likelihood of making sure you could work some of those entities. And really no one on the forum panel had any comments on that. I think it's probably not a new question, but, you know, Ned, maybe you want to comment. I suspect you've been on the DX advisory committee in the past.
Yeah, well, in some 15 years ago, roughly, the DXCC rules were changed from miles to kilometers, some number, and just that conversion triggered, I think, 2 countries. So yes, there's, you know, if you were to reduce the size of these distance by water rule, you could enable a large number of countries. I know there are a number of hams who plan the expeditions that are, you know, going over nautical charts, finding, you know, rocks that are exposed, you know, most of the time, and maybe with, you know, global warming, you know, that are going to be more. And there's a lot of pressure to declare some island groups in the Arctic territory that are probably even more challenging than Bouvet to get on as new entities. So there's a lot of people pushing for that, and if you were to change that, it would trigger a large a group of new expeditions. Now, I'm not sure what your math background is, or Scott, but you'll still never get to the top 10, even if you add another 50 more countries. There'll still be 10 that you aren't going to get. So, but what it will do, and I know this happened when the PJ country was deleted, and 4 new PJ2, PJ4, 5, and 6, 7. Created 4 new countries. Those of us who traced band entities had this really good week when we added 30 or so new counters to our DXCC Challenge Award, and it was a good week. And those are fun. And you're right, adding more islands will always add more fun things to do on the radio.
Yes, but you're right. If to be on the honor roll, you have to be within 10 of top of the honor roll, I believe, right? 9 or 10, and you're still never going to get there, right? Unless several of those get on.
But I would also, the flip side would be, I've been stuck at 307 now, and all of a sudden, if instead of looking at 340, we're looking at 360, maybe I wouldn't be stuck. I'd still be picking up a couple this year and a couple next year. So you would still feel like you were making some progress. Yeah. And it's kind of a artificial feeling, I suppose, but you'd still feel like you're making a little headway.
Yeah. Another thing that's thrown out is that, well, an alternative way of looking at awards is to look at the marathon program, the CQ Magazine marathon program, and that way, you just work the ones that are active, and that way you're not, you're competing against others who are going to have the same opportunity to work those countries as you do. So that's another way to play. It's not it's not the same program, but you start fresh every year. So it's just another way to play the game.
Well, I'll tell you, if you get a chance, who has some real strong feelings on this, and I'm kind of speaking for him, is Ray Novak, N9JA. In our conversation, my goodness, 2 years ago now, I bet, we started a program called the DX Mentor program. And what we're trying to do is find people who have helped hams under 30 achieve DXCC. And one of Ray's issues or comments was simply that it always drives him nuts when we do the last man standing, because anybody in the room that's at 180 or 190, they look around the room and see, 90-year-old people saying, oh yeah, I got 350 or I got 360 or what happens to be. I mean, this kid's in his, he's 28 or 29, and I think he's drawing the conclusion he's never going to get there. So, that bugs Ray, and clearly I'm speaking for him, but so it was his idea to start this program where if we can start acknowledging those mentors who are helping young DXers move up the chain, maybe that's where our focus ought to be. So I know that's not quite what we're talking about here, but he's very passionate about it, and it's a great conversation. I don't know what the answer is, but he really got us to thinking enough that we actually put a program together. So,
Bill, I think we have to acknowledge a couple of real issues when we talk about changing any program, right? It's who's going to gore my ox or who's going to move my cheese. A number of my friends have achieved Honor Roll Plus or top of the Honor Roll Plus, and we should never do any change to the program that detracts from what they've done. For example, Ned, my friend, lives in Scottsdale, Arizona, where it's a lot harder to work 300, 330, 340 DXCC entities than it is if you live on the coast of Maine, right? I mean, this is really the challenging, this part of the world in Southern California, it's hard. And I think we need, instead of talking about if or they, why don't we instead say, all right, let's keep our DXCC program going, but why don't we come up with some other awards that people who are newer in the hobby at any age, right, can strive for? Maybe it's, who achieved DXCC in less than a year, right? That's very doable. You go visit a contest station, join the ND7K or the N7TB, NA7TB contest stations out of Phoenix. And boy, you can do it in a weekend with the antennas either of those groups have, and Ned's part of the NA7TB contest group. So, I think, and also I would just say to Ray, when I'll see him at Dayton, I hope, is let's extend that age up, because I know a lot of new hams who are starting retirement or in their 40s or 50s, they've got the kids raised and the kids are through college, they're looking for their hobbies again, and they either not been in ham radio or they just got back in it and they want to do it too. So I think we need to understand that we not only need young people, but we need middle-aged people to keep the activity numbers going until those young people can grow into the hobby, because we have so many people over 80 who are active DXers who are going to either stop operating or unfortunately go QRT, that we want to replenish them. And it's just a real challenge, right? And of course, there was discussion about the radio in a box and could we do it, or should we put boats in the harbor and not require antennas on the island? And, I really respect those who are pushing the offshore operation, but it's just not the same as being on the island. And I don't think we're quite ready for that change at all. Well, I'm going to stop sharing because that's really all that I recall from the discussion. But let me just also say, if I may, Ned and his John Miller and Paul Ewing, and I forget your other co-chair from the San Francisco area.
Clay Cougar doing registration.
Clay Cougar, yeah, they did an amazing job of taking a meeting that has not been done for 3 years and allowing for a lot of us who are tired of being pent up at home, who are just saddened by what the pandemic has done to our lives and our families, who were ready to come back out and to see one another and to reminisce and maybe get a little bit back closer to what was normal before this plague hit the world called the COVID-19 pandemic. And then, of course, Bill, I was touched. And even though I'm a physician, this was still sobering to me. How many silent keys were read off by Paul Ewing at the banquet, maybe 20 to 25. And then he asked if the audience would care to name call signs of DXers who had passed away in the pandemic. And there were an equal number. It sounded like a huge pileup.
Wow.
And, it was just sobering to realize that it's been 3 years. And, I think one of the things that this hobby does is it gives us all an outlet for stress or an outlet for fun. And Ned and Clay and Paul and their team really gave us that again with this meeting. And again, like I said at the start, I think this is the best meeting for HF and VHF DXing and contesting you can go to in a given year. Your budget only allows one meeting. I love Dayton. I love the Sodexa DX dinner, but boy, this is a good one. And it's smaller, it's more intimate. I spent a half an hour in discussion with Eric Swartz of Elecraft. I have a couple of K4Ds now, and I'm looking to get them going with remote. And he was telling me about the plans and when the software and the K40 will be out. And I'm not going to steal his thunder. He'll have more to say about that at Dayton, but it was just nice and an unhurried, less intense, fewer people per vendor time. You really get to talk to the vendors. I had a nice discussion with John from Stepper. I have a broken 2-element stepper, and he told me what I need to do to get it fixed and need to call him and get things set up for that. And had a nice discussion with Tom Schiller, who's helped me with my own antennas. And Tom even did some modeling and sent it to me to help me think about antenna purchases from other vendors, not from him, whether I should do it or not. And so it's just a really great meeting. And it's just to see the hands from overseas and to see your friends and then the call signs that you worked. And my friend from the Granbury, Texas, W5D&T said to me on the phone last night, he said, "Tell Ned Stearns how much I appreciated him coming to dinner Thursday night." He said, "Ned's a giant in this field, and I finally got to meet him, and he's a rock star. And, none of us are celebrities, but some of us have done an extraordinary number of things in the hobby, like Ned and like the Bouvet team and others. And it's just nice to be able to sit down and chat with them and to realize they're human like we are, but they also have a lot of insight, a lot of knowledge. And, to hear like K9CT talk about his receive antennas, it stimulated my thinking of what I could do at my station to improve 160, and to talk with Ned and Lee and Mike about their remote station helps me understand what I can do to improve my own home station. It's just a great opportunity in an unhurried, relaxed, intimate kind of way to see the people who are the movers and shakers and the visionaries and the innovators in DXing and contesting. So, Ned, like I said the other day to you, kudos to you and the team, and thank you for all the work you did to put this on. What was the attendance, Ned? How many people came this year?
I think it was 483 or 485 in that neighborhood. And as we were approaching the finish line here in mid-March, we were guessing we would get to 375. But it just something happened in the last month or so. It might have been the end of the pre-registration deadline or something like that. But but we just started getting, the hockey stick curve kicked in. The thing that got to me, this is interesting. I was running around like a crazy person. I was also the AV guy, and trying to keep two tracks going was a challenge. I'd be bouncing back and forth between the rooms and getting ready for whatever's next. And I saw these two young men standing there, big smiles on their face, kind of looking around, and I stopped and introduced myself, and they said, "Yeah, well, we live here in Visalia. And this is the first time we've come to this thing. This is the first time we've been to the convention center here in Visalia." And I said, "Well, welcome to Visalia." But we found out later that we had 85 first-time attendees, which is almost 20% of the people there had never been before. So that kind of, in my mind, offsets a little that echo, that moment when we heard all of the silent key calls being in that pileup at dinner. And I wonder, well, how did that happen? And I think how it happened is because we advertised like crazy on Facebook, Twitter, email bombs, and we didn't, not a single piece of mail was sent to anybody. No flyers were sent to any clubs. We used social media as our primary and email as our primary communication path. And I think that's a very important thing you have to consider as you go forward, because that's how people interact anymore. So now one of the big topics of discussion is what about next year? And it had been announced before the convention that the Southern Cal group was not at the time interested in holding it next year. So lots of my time was spent over the weekend about discussing it, and I'm here to say that stay tuned. I think most people were just blown away about how well this worked, and that there's some reconsiderations going on about next year. So
Wow.
nothing to report just yet. The other thing is fascinating. You talked, Bill, about the prize list being pretty good. We actually ran out of raffle tickets Friday afternoon. If we had had a printing press in the parking lot, we would have been printing money. In fact, I talked to one guy and said, "Hey, don't fill all those raffle tickets out. I bet you could sell them at twice the price tomorrow," because a large number of our attendees only could start coming on Saturday. So felt bad they didn't have raffle tickets to buy, but best you could say, hey, if you had your chance, could have bought them before the event, like we kept telling you to do. So apparently the prize list was attractive, and or people hadn't bought a new radio in a while and wanted to take a shot at the incredible lineup that we had. We had the best of breed. We had K4D as a grand prize. We had a Flex 6400. We had 7610s from ICOM. We had FTDX 101s from Yaesu. We had quite a lineup of gifts that were of prizes that were available, and there was big demand. So that is a very, very important part of this program. Is this whole convention is, and our history has always been that we go beyond most other events in terms of putting together a list of prizes to be interested in, and so it was part of our success this year.
So why not
these prizes that I have shared right now? These are only the big prizes. I won a watt meter, and someone else won a 35 amp linear power supply, and there were 30 to 50 of those that were given away.
Yeah.
They have a Magali Simplex paddle. That's a $400 or $500 value. A Stepper Urban Beam. That's a $2,000 value.
Yeah.
The Premier radio, showing my bias, the K4D, and if you're a Flex person, the 6400. And every radio sold is on the Sherwood Top 20 list. I mean, every radio given away was on the Sherwood Top 20 list. And they even had a youth prize, a young man who had just been licensed, and he won an ICOM radio, a power supply, coax, and an antenna. He's going home to be a DXer. I think his dad won another prize.
Yeah,
It's terrific. So if someone was, can you give us a little logistics? How many days in it? Where, I mean, you say Visalia, I happened to look it up, but I really didn't know where it was. So maybe just a quick overview for those of us that have already put it on the potential calendar for next year. Ned, maybe a little logistical details.
yeah. Well, the Visalia became the resting place for this where it is settled because it's equidistant from LA and from San Francisco. It's about 150 miles southeast of San Francisco and 150 miles northeast of LA. So it's in Central California. Just got on State Route 99. The way I approach it is I drive up from Phoenix, go over the Grapevine on the I-5, and then take 99 north to Visalia. It's a 9.5 hour drive from here, like 12 hours or so from Tucson. So those of us from Arizona, we drive a lot. We get to this place. One of the drawbacks, though, about Visalia is that for international visitors, there is no direct flight from London to Visalia. You have to fly to Frisco or LA, either thumb a ride up or take a connection flight to Fresno, which is the closest really commercial hub, and then rent a car. Fresno is about 45 minutes drive north of Visalia. So it's one of the comments we get back a lot about that it is hard to get to. And this is an international DX convention, and we should tailor to more to our international friends. But if we moved it to LA or to Frisco, we would lose the interest in the other side of the state. So it's a challenge. It's the way it's going to be, and maybe we need to work on a better process of shuttling international visitors to the event, given the hams that live in the LA or San Francisco area. I've always thought that would be another option. And if we considered another place like Vegas or Phoenix, yeah, okay, those are hubs that people can fly into, but then we would lose a lot of our attendees from both North and South California areas. So it's an annual discussion, and we always end up staying in budget.
How far would it be?
I flew into Fresno, and I would just say, if you're like me and you're going to have to fly in, there are connecting flights via Dallas Fort Worth on American Airlines, United through Chicago, as well as Denver, maybe Chicago, but certainly Denver. I flew Delta through Salt Lake. You can fly American also direct from Phoenix. The flights from LAX up to Fresno are like a small turboprop plane. I wouldn't. I'm not sure it's a commercial airline. You don't name, so you don't recognize, I believe. And I think San Francisco, you have to drive down, but there are direct flights in from big hubs for the 3 major U.S. carriers. Also, Fresno is fed by Southwest Airlines, and so they fly through Denver. So lots of choices, and buy your tickets early. This year, the tickets were really expensive. They were like $1,200 or $1,400 for an economy class ticket. So I used frequent flyer miles to come. But I think if you can, buy your ticket, typically I buy them in September, October, November to come out before the demand goes up and the prices go up.
And what is the website, Ned?
DXConvention.com.
We just do a search on IDXC
Okay.
2023. It comes up with
Or DXConvention.com.
Yeah, DXConvention.com. Yeah, we transfer the web ownership back and forth between the North and South every other year.
Okay, I'll put that in the show notes. The other thing in your notes, Scott, if you can take a minute that hit me personally was there was a discussion about the QSL Bureau. So I'm taking us back a little bit to your notes that you were kind enough to send me, but I'm just kind of a nut about QSL cards and being a card sorter and all those kinds of things. And I've been kind of waiting for this to happen. I mean, to me, the handwriting's on the wall, but I couldn't really tell from your notes whether that was major DXpeditions are saying that they aren't going to use it, or just in general, the whole program's just slowly coming.
No, it was really some of the DXpeditioners on the platform were saying that they're just going to stop responding via bureau for bureau requests. That it costs them money. They don't collect any money for doing it. and that it's just not financially viable when the post-COVID DXpedition prices are $10 to $50 per QSO or $90 per unique call, that they just can't be giving away QSLs. I know it's the final courtesy of a contact, but that was in an era when it was 3 cents to mail a letter.
Yeah.
And now it's between $4 and $10 to send a QSL overseas by direct mail. So right, that was what that was about, Bill. Yeah.
Okay. And I know
And
most
I
of the
just
time,
have to say that Ned just confirms what I heard on your podcast a few months ago from Kate, one of your guests. The digital marketing works for promoting ham radio events.
that's right. I'll tell you what else it's working for us is we've gotten 6 new members in the last month or so, and 5 have come either through a podcast discussion or the Ohio Section Journal, where we write a weekly column. So there are different ways. We've got to make sure we're getting our message across to these people, and they're receptive. We just got to get it in front of them.
And I encourage anyone listening who's part of a DX club to invite the organizers for the DX convention to come and do a Zoom to your club sometime next year, in the fall or early winter, just to promote it, right? I mean, just as we promote this Fodexa banquet and things, we need to promote Visalia. So Ned presented to the Twin City DX Club for us in March. I'm not sure anyone else came, but we should have had him on in November or December. And I think that we would probably have 5 or 10 more people coming from the upper Midwest out for this.
Well, maybe I'm the scheduler for our club, Ned. So maybe I'll pencil you in for November and contact you midsummer. But please, as soon as the decision is made and the dates, and make sure you drop me a note, and I'll get that out through all the media that I have access to. So
yeah, I mean, if it happens, there's a good chance that my club will be involved again. I mean, we traditionally have worked with both North and South over the years, and we continue to do that. But the unfortunate thing is that it's already a late start. If we started today to get this process going, so but I think in the next 2 to 3 weeks, if there is an announcement, we'll hear something in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So we can start doing long range planning and start promoting it around more, because this is the one. I've been to Dayton a few times, and it's a completely different experience. Like Scott says, it's you get to talk to the people that are either do what you want to do or have done amazing things that have just been some of the most significant things in your ham radio career, working this guy on that country, and you get to sit down and talk to them and face to face. It's just an amazing experience.
The thing that's impressed me with all the folks on these podcasts, as well as presenting at SEDCO and meeting at just different forums, is everybody has a passion for it once you get them started. And the rig in the box guys, for instance, when I start talking to Greg and Hal Turley, it's kind of like, wasn't ready for that. I better get a cup of coffee and sit down, because they're engaged and they want to go, and they're just an example. You two are a great example, but the people you've named, you start talking to them about funding a DXpedition, boom. The best way to organize a DXpedition, boom. Plenty of discussion, wire antennas, portable antennas. It's just one topic after another, and everyone's loaded with passion. And to me, that's kind of the fun of the whole thing, is to just, I think, Scott, you said a minute ago, you hear certain things and now you start thinking, gee, what do I need to do at home? And I'm already, even talking to Joe Pater last week, it's like, my beverages really didn't work that well last fall. I got to get with him in the next couple of weeks and get a new game plan. And that's what starts happening. You get jazzed about it. So anything that is a final note that you're thinking of, or comments otherwise?
Well, one of my couple things. The Northern Cal DX Foundation booth had a lot of traffic. We had several things going on. We had our own little raffle. It was very successful, and we also had the rock collection that the foundation has. We have almost 200 countries confirmed with rocks that we show on display, and we added the Bouvet rocks this weekend. And we also had serial number 4 of the radio in the box, or rib, on our booth there, the lid open, and there was a swarm of people around that thing the entire time. And then we also set up and we operated real time with the rib that's out in Papaiti Harbor in French Polynesia. And so we had people who had an interest in running a DX pilot just sit down and run the station in
That's cool.
sound mode and work in a pilot. I mean, it was something for everybody. So that was just a lot of fun. Now, one of the other things that Foundation, they made an announcement at the DX forum that, I mean, we had a Foundation meeting Saturday morning before festivities started. And one of the things we decided to do is to start to get serious about deliberate QRM, which is becoming a real problem for DXpeditions, is, especially those which are constrained to run low power, like the Bouvet operation could only run 100 watts because they just didn't have enough generator power to get to kilowatt. And so they are vulnerable, more so than most expeditions, to be drowned out by the effects of deliberate QRM that we seem to see. Personally, I hear more about it in Europe than I see here, at least in the West, United States. But I think that okay, DXpeditions are returning, but those who enjoy jamming DXpeditions have been waiting dormant for years, and they're back in their game. So what the Foundation has decided to do was to do what we do best, which is to put aside a fund to and accept proposals for people to study solutions to the problem. And those solutions might come in the way of signal processing equipment, or maybe it's direction finding equipment in order to locate people who do this, or maybe it's to study different behavioral operating techniques in running a pileup or something like that. But we're open to hear from requests from those who might need some financial assistance to complete a project that may have some impact on this problem going forward. So this is something that we announced at the forum, and apparently it was well received because we got a good applause for that.
That's terrific. And what a great use of funds.
Yeah.
Really great.
Yeah. So
Scott?
people are wondering what funds for foundations do. Yeah, we award grants to the foundations. Yeah, we're working on technology, and now we add to that we're working on DQRM resolution.
One thing I don't want to go into here, but one of the tools that y'all provided, I take a lot of advantage of, is the beacons. Especially when I was doing a lot of mobile work. I used to use the beacons a ton just to kind of, I didn't have to stop driving. I could just, do a memory recall, and then I could listen, and then, boy, those were terrific tools. And I love that tool.
I have a heart in that too. I've been developed an antenna that we're trying to deploy to more than one site. And that's a challenge in itself. But I've been studying propagation characteristics. I've discovered a way to find sporadic E openings using the beacons. So I promised papers for all kinds of things, and that's what I want to get going on, is because we're going into the summer season, and you can actually predict sporadic E by watching the beacons. It's an interesting thing I've found that the world will know about here shortly.
Well, I'm connected with a couple newsletters, so if you need to test your content anywhere,
yeah, okay, very good.
Scott, anything on your list that we wanted to touch on?
I think we've covered it, Bill. Thanks for talking about Visalia. Again, I just encourage anyone who's never been but has an interest in DXing to think about going next year. You don't have to fly. A number of hams, when W0GJ and his wife drove from near where I live, and Dave and his friend Greg drove from the North Carolina, South Carolina border. And, I think W8GEX and AJ8B could make a nice road trip next year.
I couldn't afford the tab, Scott. But that's funny you say that. Karen and I have been looking for a project to rent a mobile home, and maybe I could get Joe and Janet, and the four of us could just motor out there. That would be a hoot.
think you'd have you'd have so much fun, you wouldn't stop laughing.
Yeah, boy, that's a shame, huh?
Well, it's a pity Joe couldn't join us today because, hope to see him at Dayton, and he and Janet at the DX dinner at Dayton. So hopefully this will go live on your playlist before Dayton, so we can see you there. And just support your DX, support the regional DX meetings, the W4 DXCC, the W9 DXCC, and all of the regional DX meetings that go on. It's a great way to keep the hobby vibrant and to maintain some fellowship, because the friendships that we make through this hobby are the most important things. And if anything we've learned from the pandemic is don't take them for granted. There were people I was looking forward to seeing at Dayton that I heard call signs read off who are now silent keys. And I'm like, oh man, I haven't talked to him since 3 or 4 years ago. And I'm sad I don't get a chance to chat again.
Yeah, no, I hear you on that. So, wow. Well, I appreciate, I'm going to push this out both on podcast and YouTube on Monday because of the Visalia just finishing up. And I think it's building some momentum for Dayton. And Ned, I'm looking forward to meeting you somewhere. And I, of course, both of you, I appreciate you guys taking your valuable time to meet with us and get this out. And we're slowly creeping up that listeners and subscriber list. And boy, with you guys, it makes it easy. So I'm excited. And but seriously, keep me in mind with it when there's new Visalia news. I'll get it out to everybody, and we'll see what we can do.
We'll certainly do that.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. I sincerely appreciate it. And if there's anything I can do here in the RF hole of the Midwest, I'd be happy to lend a hand or do some testing or whatever. But I'm always here for you.
Okay, thank you very much for having me,
Bill.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thanks. 73.
73. I've already set aside the dates in 2024 for the Visalia DX Convention, at least those dates that I anticipate it's going to be. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the DX Mentor. I would really like to thank our guests, Scott, K0MD, and Ned, AA7A. They were both guests in the very first episode of the DX Mentor. It is still the most watched episode in the catalog. You should check it out. I would love to have your feedback, answer your questions, and provide help with any DX or amateur radio issues that you may have. If you need clarification on something, or you just have a question, you can email me at thedxmentor@gmail.com. You can also follow me on Twitter using the DX Mentor as the handle. An episode schedule and more information can be found at ajb.com/the-dx-mentor-podcast. Please drop me a line if you've achieved an all-time new one, receive recognition, or have a DX event that you would like us to mention. We would be happy to do that. 7-3 for this episode. And as always, thanks to my ex-wife Karen for her love and support.